Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power.
Otep, this is Femi here with Freedom Now, and your ears are in tuned at high frequencies in a liberated zone. Freedom Now is a Pan-Africanist, global news outlet from coast to coast, dispelling the Western propaganda media and their all lies point of views. Freedom Now is devoted to relay true news, views, and proper clues to form solutions around freedom for the oppressed worldwide. Now, get relaxed, grab a pen, and phone a friend, because Freedom Now is set to begin to awaken deep sleepers dreaming about freedom now, within, in, freedom now, in.
Habarigani. This is Sister Thage with Freedom Now's agenda for this Black History Saturday, February 1st, 2025. We commence with our ancestor, Didan Kamati, in the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar. This hour, prolific author, radical historian, professor of African American Studies at the University of Houston, and Freedom Now co-producer, Dr. Gerald Horne interviews Dr. Keidrick Roy, Junior Fellow at the Society of Fellows at Harvard University, here to discuss his book, American Dark Age, Radical Feudalism and the Rise of Black Liberalism. And then we pour deep into the Black arts right here in Los Angeles, Leimert Park, and are joined by Ben Caldwell. He's a filmmaker, artist, educator, community organizer, founder of Kaos Network, and so much more. He joins us here today to discuss his book with Dodge Frazier titled Chaos Theory, the Afrocosmic Arc of Ben Caldwell. And he's also going to share about some of his latest community projects. Also, it's that time of year for celebrating Black excellence at the Hub for Cultural Celebration, the 33rd Pan-African Film Festival happening from February 4th through the 17th at the Culver City Theater in Culver City. The schedule and event details are on the Pan-African Film Festival website. That's www.paff.org. This year's festival will feature over 150 films from 34 countries and 19 languages. There's also events for empowering Black creatives and more. Again, the details are at www.paff.org. Our music clip mix includes MLK, Zap Mama, Alice Coltrane, Horace Tapscott, Billy Higgins, Freestyle Fellowship, AC Alone, McCoy Tyner, and more. So sit back, phone a friend, and as always we stand ready for revolution.
All our studies, history is best qualified to reward all research. And when you see that you got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who had problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight.
So we bring you the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar here at KPFK's Freedom Now, where every day, every week, every month we cover African history. February 2nd, 1848, the first draft of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ceded Mexican land to the United States, Subsequently, every provision of the agreement between defeated Mexico and the United States was violated by the United States. February 3rd, 1969, Eduardo Mondlane, founder president of Frelimo, Front for the Liberation of Mozambique, was assassinated. Frelimo was a vanguard movement in the decolonization struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Mozambique. February 3rd, 1930, the Vietnamese Communist Party was founded by Ho Chi Minh and the Revolutionary Intelligentsia of Vietnam to liberate Vietnam from French and later U.S. colonial forces. The Vietnamese Communist Party continues today to provide a higher quality of life under socialism than under French and U.S. colonial rules in critical areas of education, childcare, health, food, housing, and culture. February 3rd, 1810, the black hero of Argentina dies. Antonio Ruiz was a national hero of Buenos Aires, Argentina. He died in the struggle to liberate his country from colonialism. February 3rd, 1903, Jack Johnson becomes the first Negro heavyweight champion in the world. February 3rd, 1920, the Negro Baseball League is founded. February 4th, 1969, MPLA, Movement for the Liberation of Angola, begins armed struggle against the Portuguese colonial forces in Angola, giving rise to the overthrow not only of Portuguese colonialism in Angola, but the overthrow of the military dictatorship and the rise of a socialist government in Portugal. February 5th, 1967, the Arusha Declaration is ratified, which clarifies the ideology of Tanzania as socialism. February 5th, 1915, Janu Gool, a South African woman freedom fighter, organizes against the Colored Affairs Department in racist South Africa. She was a co-founder of the All-African Convention in 1935. She further organized youth resistance groups throughout the South Africa in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and was forced into exile in 1963. February 6, 1820. Africans in America emigrate back to Sierra Leone from New York to escape the ravages of slavery. February 6, 1961. The jail-in movement starts in Rock Hill, South Carolina, when students refuse to pay fines and requested jail sentences. SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, urges Southwide Jail No Bail campaign. February 6, 1945. Bob Marley, the reggae superstar, who during the period of depoliticalization of music with the corporate-created disco craze, brought reggae to the masses of humanity as a musical ideological weapon, whose lyrical content affirmed African history, the decolonization movements, black pride, love, and unity among many themes. February 7th, 1926, Negro History Week is originated by Carter G. Woodson and observed for the first time. In 1976, it becomes Black History Month. This has been Brother Didan Kamati with the African Drumbeat Historical Calendar.
We would like to close this section of our program with a unity chant from Azania, South Africa. So please join us. We will say Amandla, which means power, and your response should be Awetu, which means it is ours.
Amandla.
Awetu.
Amandla.
Awetu.
Amandla.
Awetu.
For KPFK Pacifica Radio, this is Gerald Horne, and with me on the line is Keidrick Roy, Junior Fellow at the Society of Fellows at Harvard University in Massachusetts, and author of the book, American Dark Age, Racial Feudalism and the Rise of Black Liberalism. Thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, Keidrick Roy.
Thank you so much for having me, Professor Horne. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you. So why did you write this book?
So I wrote American Dark Age after recognizing the myriad medieval symbols and references in far-right demonstrations like the 2017 Charlottesville rally. I saw it in the racially charged manifestos of mass shooters in Christchurch, New Zealand, and Poway, California. and in the fringe philosophies such as the Dark Enlightenment, which seeks to transform the global order into a type of hierarchical feudal system. And so in all of these instances, including among a few participants in the Capitol riots in 2021, medieval symbols I saw being used to glorify a type of mystical path, or mythical past, where white people emerged as the dominant caste. So given that context, my book wrestled with why prominent African-American writers and thinkers during the 19th century critically assessed slavery in the South and prejudice in the North in ways that also invoked the medieval world, and how their judgments of American society might speak to our present moment. So before starting the project, I read a variety of slave narratives that made reference to feudalism or its associated terminology, notions of vassalage, baronial domains, nobles, barons, lords, crusades, and what Frederick Douglass even terms the skin aristocracy, that describes the conditions of racial subjugation, that described those for him in the North. So I also found that thinkers such as Thomas Jefferson used similar metaphors during the Revolutionary era to distinguish America's system of government from Old World Europe. For example, in the summary view of the rights of British Americans in British America in 1774, he said that the colonies weren't a feudal property of England. And in his autobiography, he claimed to have developed laws that eliminated Europe's feudal vestiges from the state of Virginia. Laws such as those that eliminated primogeniture and entail, which are just passing down the land from one generation to the next, in ways that the eldest would hold the land. So he saw this as a feudal vestige. And Jefferson also saw himself as pushing against notions of feudalism and his support for religious freedom and providing for public education. And while reading Jefferson, I also found that he attacked the what he called this notion of artificial aristocracy of inherited wealth in Europe in favor of what he saw to be a so-called natural aristocracy in the United States, which he felt provided for a true aristocracy of virtue and talents. However, what Jefferson failed to recognize is that the racialized claims that he made against Black people's intelligence, in Notes on the State of Virginia, for example, and his questioning of their virtues, it made their entry into this so-called natural aristocracy all but impossible. So even though Jefferson rejects this idea of European feudalism, by that I mean the idea that there is a set system of hierarchy from the kings and the nobles at the top down to the peasants at the bottom, and that there's certain land requirements and the way that land passes down from person to person, so on and so forth. Like though he rejects this vision of European feudalism, he embraced what I call a type of racial feudalism in America. So American Dark Age argues that the beginning, most prominently associated with Jefferson in the 18th century, the beginning of these kinds of racial feudal notions, persisted among generations of slaveholders and their supporters who explicitly embraced America's purported semblance to medieval Europe. Even after the antebellum era, the Ku Klux Klan, for example, in the 1920s, celebrated medieval imagery, and they saw themselves as the so-called Knights of the South. And they even arranged their organizational structure on a type of feudal system. So that's what the first half of the book is about, just this idea of racial feudalism. And very briefly, I argue in the second half of the book, and that's where it gets its subtitle, the notion of Black liberalism. I say that Black liberalism formed in response to the persistence of the feudalistic imagery that haunted the United States during the antebellum era. And so I examined the ways that Black writers and thinkers developed variations of the Enlightenment liberal tradition that were attentive to their needs and that avoided some of the traditional liberalism's blind spots that did not account for race or gender.
What's unique about your argument, Keidrick Roy,
Mhm.
is that this may be the first book, at least one of the first that I know of, that truly deals, engages with this age-old concept of so-called American exceptionalism. What you're saying, if I'm understanding you, is that the exceptionalism of the United States of America consists of combining three different historic modes of production: slavery, feudalism, and emergent capitalism. That is veritably unique. But in any case, Keidrick Roy, who were Frances Ellen Watkins Harper and Harriet Jacobs? What role do they play in your book? And is there any sort of unique Black feminist contribution to this Black liberalism that you describe?
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much. So Harriet Jacobs is a very interesting story, and she's becoming more well known, certainly in political theory circles. But the narrative of the life of a slave girl is very popular among people who did literary studies, history of African American literature, and so on. But she was an enslaved woman who had to contend with a lot to make it to freedom. She was under constant surveillance by her enslaver, and in order to escape, she hid in this tight crawl space where she could still see her family through a little peephole for a number of years before she was finally able to get out and gain freedom in the North. And Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, though she was free, she had a very deep commitment to the plight of African Americans. She was a prominent abolitionist, captured in William Still's underground records, and she articulated a vision for freedom for Black Americans. So both I read Frances Ellen Watkins Harper on the one hand and Harriet Jacobs on the other as contributing to these notions of liberty, reform, and progression. And this is something that another formerly enslaved person named William Wells Brown articulated as the key to transforming the conditions for Black people in the United States. And in terms of their feminist contributions, I found it interesting that most of the writers that are associated with this African American liberal tradition that I've described were very committed to women's rights, particularly women's suffrage. We see this in Frederick Douglass's writings. We see this in William Wells Brown's writings, and so on. So they truly wanted to expand the dimensions of the American project to all Americans, including women. But what Harper and what Jacobs give us, and especially Jacobs in her first person narrative, is a sense of what it means to be a woman in particular, and what she calls experience these effects of slavery that were uniquely her own as a woman. And one of the key liberatory strategies that she proposes in her narrative is, instead of she had to take one of the white babies down in her charge down to the dining hall to eat, and she had to endure a lot of humiliation in that. She couldn't even sit with the baby that she's supposed to be taking care of. So she had the people in the dining hall bring the food up to her, which causes a big stir, so on and so forth. But she says that this is a type of strategy that will redirect these modes of oppression and can put pressure on these modes of oppression to reconfigure the conditions such that she can benefit from from redirecting the power, the flow of power. So in any case, she provides a lot of critical insight, she and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, to the Black Liberal Project. So that's why I wrote about them.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Frederick Douglass, and you also mentioned his concept of skin aristocracy. I guess
Yes.
that's his contribution to the theorizing of racial feudalism. What more do you have to say about this towering 19th century abolitionist?
Yes. Frederick Douglass had a way with words. He wrote thousands of speeches, and he had a lot to say about the plight of African Americans, both in terms of racial feudalism. He called the plantation that he was on, for example, a baronial domain that reflected the Middle Ages in Europe. But he also attempted to posit ways to both abolish slavery and end racism or prejudice that African Americans were facing. So he interfaced with presidents such as Lincoln in order to make things better. And what Douglass contributed so powerfully to my project was I wanted to think with him about what it meant to be about the identity blind type of liberal project, which says that we shouldn't take a person's identity into account when forming a type of any kind of political act or coalition. And so Douglass was skeptical about not accounting for a very central component in his life. He wrote 3 autobiographies in which he told people, hey, this is what it's like to be an enslaved person. And he made sure that people understood his perspective and his identity. At the same time, Douglass didn't necessarily push for policies that were identity driven. And that is policies that that only worked to benefit a particular group, except for the abolition of slavery, because he was thinking in ways that were politically pragmatic and in ways that he could get the broadest coalition possible in order to change the conditions in the United States. So what I'm able to theorize through Frederick Douglass is what I call a type of identity awareness that avoids the pitfalls of both approaches in order to give us a way to think about how we might about liberalism, both in Douglass's day and about our present democracy in our current moment.
With regard to those latter points, what did these Black writers have to say about the genocide against the indigenous that was unfolding as they were writing? And what did they have to say about the dispossession of people of Mexican origin, which was unfolding as they were writing?
Yes. So there were a couple of writers, most prominently Hosea Easton, who not only talked about or gave me a sense of what racial feudalism meant for Black people, but that also shed light on the displacement of indigenous people and Mexicans. Hosea Easton used this crusader imagery to assail what he calls the, quote, late unholy war with the Indians and the, quote, wicked crusade against the peace of Mexico, as he was penning his treatise, which is one of the first works of African-American philosophy during the 1830s. And Martin Delany was another person who also decided to draw on, use feudalistic imagery to critique Zachary Taylor, who'd become the president in the late 1840s. As he was writing to Frederick Douglass, Delany said that the extent to which the American people carry this glorification of military crusaders is beyond parallel. The extent to which this homage is carried ceases to be respectful, since it is neither kind nor complimentary, but like the homage of the serf to the noble or the vassal to the lord, it is ludicrous. So in taking Martin Delaney and Hosea Easton and taking them seriously, they had a much broader liberatory project that I think is useful for thinking about racial feudalism, not just in the black-white binary, but more broadly in the history of United States culture.
Finally, Keidrick Roy of Harvard University, author of the book American Dark Age, Racial Feudalism and the Rise of Black Liberalism. What's next on your agenda?
Yes, so next on the agenda, I am moving from my postdoc position at Harvard to Dartmouth College, where I'll teach government and political theory. And I'll continue writing and thinking about these issues. The next book is going to look at how African Americans took up and transformed these ideas of the Enlightenment since the 18th century. So I was very interested, not necessarily in examining the Enlightenment movement as such, but in how African Americans took up the Enlightenment ideas, infused them with their faith tradition, with their lived experience, and gives us a different picture of what Enlightenment could become in the future. So that's the next book.
Well, thank you for joining us on Freedom Now, KPFK, Los Angeles.
Thank you so much for having me, Professor Horne. I really appreciate it.
This is Sister Flora, and you are listening to Freedom Now at KPFK 90.7 FM in occupied Mexico, including Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, 93.7 FM in San Diego, and streaming live on the web at kpfk.org. Today's program, as well as 10 prior editions, can be reheard at kpfk.org/audio archive, and scroll down to Freedom Now. From 12 to 1 p.m., following Freedom Now is your sister Assumpta, with Spotlight Africa addressing issues facing Mother Africa. For a truly alternative international perspective on world affairs, check out RTTV Russia, CCTV China, and online at Presna, Latina Cuba Telesur Venezuela, News 24 South Africa, and Press TV Iran.
Have the knowledge and self as a people, then we could be free and no devil could ever enter the boundaries. I stand in the center around all these sounds I see. Blessed are lives that I found the key. That's how we be. We are by no means ashamed of our cultural background. Not a tad bit afraid of change. Look around, it's the same old thing.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh, no, I can't call it. Trying to maintain, overlooking these boundaries. I gotta be righteous, I gotta be me. I gotta be conscious, I gotta be free. I gotta be able, I gotta attack. I gotta be stable, I gotta be black. Who is that surrounding me? Enemy, you cross the wrong boundary. Poof, wicked witness, wizardry. Disappear from here and end up in the tree. Cross the wrong boundary. Once we have the knowledge of some people, then we could be free and no devil could ever enter the boundary. I stand and listen around all these sounds I see. Blessing all that I found the key. That's how we be.
This is Sister Paige with Freedom Now, and we are so honored to be in conversation with Ben Caldwell, who is our Baba, filmmaker, educator, innovator, organizer, and so much more in the Black Arts movement. We're here in Los Angeles, Leimert Park. There's the Kaos Network. So we welcome you back to Freedom Now, Baba Ben Caldwell, and we thank you so much for all you do to create space for the future generations.
Thank you to be here with you and to keep this energy going of my fellow mentor and friend, Didan, my brother. So it's good to be on this with you.
Right on.
Thank you for having me on it. Thank you.
We appreciate you so much, and more than you know. So we are so glad also to share with the community and our listening audience about your work. So we're here to discuss your new book, Chaos Theory, the Afro-Cosmic Art. And so to begin, can you talk to our listeners about why you wrote this book?
Well, it really came up in conversations, and I want to shout out my co-writer, Taj, who really was the catalyst for making it into a real written form, because we were talking about it in a lot of different ways. But he asked me, had you ever thought of making it a book? And I was like, no, not really. And he says, well, how would you like doing it? And I was like, if it's done by you, yes. And he says, cool, then let's work on it like that. So we were able to develop it, and I like the tone of the book. It makes it almost like a third person, so it's a good kind of a feeling in it, that it isn't just like a biography about my life and the trials I had growing up, and if I ever got shot and hurt and all those kinds of trials and tribulations. I didn't do the deep dive into that part of my life. I mainly wanted to see where my life was touched by all these wonderful spirits that I've been able to meet along the way. And that's the reason I kind of called it the chaos theory, being the whole idea of it seeing everything as opposed to just one thing. And that being a part of what we think out. And then the other part is the cosmic arc is just really, if you've ever thought about it, I've seen these memes on TikTok and Instagram and things like that about how many ancestors for these last 400 years it took in order for you to be here as this one individual spirit. And so you're a vestibule of all those dreams up to this time that we were incarcerated in this country. And the dreams, it's our turn, it's our time to really present the beauty and wonder of what they've been able to pass on to us. And to me, that's our culture. And the culture shows itself like a very holistic way, just like we are as humans. We're a holistic blend of all of our families up to this point, and then how we blend in with nature. And we're finding out that a lot of the methodology of colonizing nature doesn't work, because it makes it where there are people who put plastic and old dinosaur parts in our food that they call margarine and stuff like that, and make it part of our internal works because they want money, as opposed to really helping us live as humans for a while. They're just wanting the quick sense of money.
Right. And in your book, you talk about Video 3333. Can you give our listeners some background and insight into Video 3333?
The whole theory that started with chaos grew out of Video 3333. And Video 3333, we thought it was really, 3 threes. That's the power of the pyramid right there. And so it kind of amazed me that was my first address. And so it kind of even points to the concept of chaos within that principle, because threes are a part of the basic concept of chaos in the first place. So what we chose chaos as a name initially was weird, because when the Russia folded in 1990, video was dying and digital was starting to be a name. And so it made us relook at it. And then we were also able to acquire the building. My wife and I at the time were able to acquire our building here. And with that other side, we opened it initially as a coffee shop before there was Fifth Street Dick's. We thought that we really kind of, while we were dating, we went to coffee shops and it felt like outsiders, because it mostly was outside our community where they were living. And so we put together our own system at our place and tried it out for a while. And it basically worked until Richard came. We were happy passed it on to him, said, you've been doing it from Seattle and you know exactly what you're wanting to do and you're bringing a clientele with you, so run with it. So we then thought of a new name for the whole collective at that time. And I'd gone to American Film Institute. They were doing a thing on all the new economic systems of the world, and chaos happened to be one of them. And that kind of amazed me. It was like, there was a chaos economic theory? Wow. So we thought that we would use that. And it was presented by, I think, a lady, I forget the woman's name, but I think she was in in West Germany at the time. And so anyway, she made the presentation there. It struck our mind, and we said, why don't we call our business Kaos Network? And network means to organize the chaos, you know? So it was to interconnect if people didn't understand that we were in it for the real name of chaos, of the interactivity in the cosmos of what it meant, but we thought we would add that network as a part of what I'm doing as a media person, is interconnecting things. So that's where it led us within that. And then within Video 33, my first part of the incubation study was through my work at Howard, and also my work for my second thesis at UCLA was in ethno-communications and international business. So when I took ethno-communications, I really was emulating, I liked Zora Neale Hurston a lot. I liked the way she and Maya Deren worked with their work, and also Shirley Clark. So almost three of the women who were working in that kind of cultural collective of working with humans, I found they were the best vista on how to deal with it to me. And so so at that point on, I used the video as a writing device. You know, instead of just writing it, I says, let me go and talk. Let's see, me and Barbara McCullough then said, let's talk to Bob Marley. Do you think we could speak with him? Because we're in school, we found out that we had his number through his manager, so we called and he said yes. So from then on, we started just asking as students if we could talk to some of these folks. So it ended up being people like the World Saxophone Quartet. It ended up being Horace Tapscott. It ended up being Charles Dixon. Ended up being Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, Grady Tate, Ron Carter, Billy Eckstine's, all of his kind of, the band got to perform there, Willie Dixon, B.B. King, all of these guys we got to talk and communicate with in that manner of taking note as opposed to doing a documentary. I wanted to use it as a note-taking device as opposed to saying, this is going to be an end documentary about B.B. King. I just made it, let's keep these words and the notes and the ideas of this man and keep it that way. And everybody else can shoot his performances. So then that led me to doing the same thing here in Los Angeles. So I started wanting to investigate the thread of the African-American music, similar to looking at African-American music through the lens of the OAAU, the Organization of African-American Unity that Malcolm put together. And he saw us as one contiguous group of people that speak all these colonized languages, from Portuguese, French, English. English is one of our colonized language we forget. And Spanish, colonized language. And if you look at the makeup of the cultures that these languages in, we're a pretty predominant culture. I would say, just look at Brazil alone when it comes to Latin blacks. I think we have more Latin blacks in the Americas, just counting that country, not including Brazil. I mean, not including Cuba, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Honduras. All these are all Latin-speaking places, and almost more than half of them are black. half the population is Black in each of these. So that's the kind of way that I kind of would like to look at that broad base. So we started looking, I then looked at what they created in, let's say, Brazil first, samba, 60s children. You then look at Cuba, rumba, 60s, 40s, 60s children. Then you look at, and all of these are pushback songs, pushback culture, living your culture for real. Hip hop here, and then go-go in DC, Soul Train here when I first came. Not necessarily hip hop being the strongest force, it was really Soul Train. So all of these different folks had different movements going on and so I tried to study it. And I then opened my place for the kids to come here. And the kids that walked in are like Yo-Yo, and then Yo-Yo being to me. And then I was just listening to Candyman. He's still rapping. He has some good raps going. And then Lebo M, who did Lion King's music. He was a part of our of Video 33's first youth group, and he ended up writing Lion King around the same time that he was working with iFresh. He was working with Disney on honing out those things.
We are speaking with Ben Caldwell, artist, filmmaker, founder of Kaos Network in Leimert Park. And so as we continue, can you tell us about The Good Life?
The Good Life grew out of a discussion that we had as a group of teachers, I would say. At first, me and Falashade, who's Janie Goodkin at the time, we were talking about seeing how we could blend in health and wellness within the youth while this is going on, because there was a health and wellness good, strong movement going on with Dr. Goss and Dr. Sabi. And so I started my place as really a healing methodology, emulating that with Dr. Sabi. He and I did about a month retreat with him and got to talk out what I was going to start here. And I did it as a healing process with him. He and I first started the place together until they tried to mess with him in New York, and he kind of changed his trajectory a little bit after that. But we were reconnecting just before he got caught again. But Sabi is an integral part of what I'm doing in my place in the sense of its healing properties, because I think of myself as more of a healer than anything else in this communication systems. I don't want to be any of the names. I just want to be a healer in it. And so, and it's a real thing, because look how much people emulate media. So we need some healing in it, because look at what we have in front of us now. And so, and I can probably say that all of the folks that came through our place are representing the culture, music, in a high, strong cultural way. And then when we started Project Blowed, it started with the Project Blowed album. And in that Project Blowed album, we had Lance, who did a piece that was a mixtapes, and he was talking about his time here at iFresh, which is a real hip one, because he calls us out. And while I was driving around the city, and then I heard his piece, I was like, oh, he said iFresh, like that. And so out of that group, and then I think the one that's the penultimate who made them, who's doing really well, is the Freestyle Fellowship, and also Ava DuVernay, which they were a part. She was a part of the group that was called Figures of Speech. Her and Giant were rappers together. So all of that was under the banner of the Project Blowed first album, and I've been with that group for 30 years now. We just celebrated our 30-year anniversary, and we've been through depressions together. We've been at onslaught with police attacking our place, to even having the community not totally understanding the youth, and us trying to get a conversation between the two so they could better understand what's the art part of graffiti and some of the 5-dimensional parts of it, and how it's a real beautiful collective of young men and women, and they're working together, you know, in a way that has their backs. They get to cover their backs, and with all of them collectively together, it makes a real strong group because they're all happy doing their own kind of creative artwork. And one of the things that we ended up doing is following the principle of I call it the big A, and then instead of saying STEAM, I say A is the tent that science, technology, engineering, and math is created in, because they're all arts, or they wouldn't have used Leonardo da Vinci as a way to say what the Da Vinci process was, and then say, oh, we forgot the artist. You named it after an artist. What are you talking about?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's so crazy. So those are the kinds of things that I think that we do in our culture that's really pretty interesting once people start operating that way. And so I really emphasize that it's creativity that we do first.
Creativity for sure. And we are speaking with Ben Caldwell, artist, filmmaker, and founder of Kaos Network in Leimert Park. And so on the creative tip, what are some of the projects that you're currently working on?
So the projects that I'm working on now are, I have a wonderful show that Janelle and Taj curated for me with the help of Cam. Thank you, Cam, and also thank you, Art in Practice, to really showcase a piece of the folks and my work in this community that birthed it. And it's been so much fun to watch how happy the community is in seeing themselves represented through my work and their work here. And people, please come by and see it, because you might see some of your friends on the wall here and people that you know, because it's a survey of the last 40 years of my fun and golf involvement in this place called Leimert. And I really want to shout out the person that really helped this out the most. And he just passed away, and it's Alonzo Davis. And Davis brothers are the ones that started Brockman Gallery, and Brockman Gallery is the reason that we call that an artist community. And so they're the birthrights of what we call him and his family, his mother. It was named after his mother. The Brockman is the maiden name of Davis's then. And so I want to really shout that out, because it's my heart is still hurting, because he was a good friend and mentor, and really helped me get my feet together here in Los Angeles as an artist. And like I said, he's the reason we call this an artist community. And I think that's really phenomenal that I want to give him a strong shout out. Hey. So, and of course, since I'm talking about passing spirits, is Sika, Francis Williams, and Billy Higgins, Horace Tapscott. All those brothers and sisters were the foundation of what we call this Leimert Park, and they're given shout outs in the show too, because Horace Tapscott's in there, Bob Marley interviews in there, Peter Tosh interviews in there, B.B. King's interviews in there, and some of the hip hoppers interviews are in the show. And the other most wonderful thing that has happened as of during the pandemic, we were able to initiate our Sankofa City Shuttle. And it's a shuttle that is art-based, because the template is to cut them out in accordance to the need of the community. So instead of Detroit dictating what we should look like in our cars, we can dictate it regionally from each community, or even from each shopping center or each apartment complex. We can make you a custom car within our own community using micro industry, using laser cutters and folding, bending, and riveting it to the origami design that you want. So the ones that we have right now is the body, is the platform that we're building it off of. And so it's interesting, they call the platforms a skateboard, because it looks like a skateboard. It's 4 wheels, And then the base bottom is all the batteries, so it gives it its weight. And then you put the wheels changers for it, and then we also will be able to make them autonomous, where we'll be able to interconnect it with our beaming system that we're going to put around the neighborhood. So then within that, we're wanting to create communications within it. So all of these various ways, we want people to come to our Saturday workshop from 2 o'clock until 5. We do it every Saturday except the last Saturday. The last Saturday, we do it on a Sunday, which is every last Sunday, we have the Leimert Park Art Walk. And with it, we have a wonderful array of helpers, or I would say connective tissue that we're working with, because we're making this portion of the next 4 years toward the Olympics. We want to build where we won't be whining about what happened to us and how they treated us this way or that way. We've gone through the 1984 Olympics. We've gone through the World Cup before, and I was here during both of those. And the World Cup, I was able to host the Cameroonian contingent, and there's a way that we could work with them because they're going to be coming here wanting to sell and deal with it, and they would love to work with us if we already have our connections together by the time they get here. You know, so we have a year and a half to get ready for the World Cup, and so we're going to work on that every month. The last Sunday of the month, come and work with us on seeing which one of the African countries and the diasporan countries we can build out with, so we can make them happy when they come back here a year and a half from now. If it's the embassies, the consulates, the business people, all of them, choose a month that you want to work with us on, that we could really build out your needs. So when the World Cup comes here, we'll be able to better operate like a team of people instead of you coming here and saying you're mad at this or mad at that. I want good press to come out on seeing how seamlessly good we work together, because we've been able to work out the problems by the time the World Cup comes. The following year, it's the Super Bowl right up the street from us here on Leimert Park. So we want to make sure that we're in position to that, because people of color like to hang out with people of color. So they'll be asking where are the places where the people are. And so we're right next to the metro line. So a lot of people will be spilling off here. And I think it will also be, we want to make sure that we aggress that and take care of that, so we can offer up jobs, so the people who are walking around here will have jobs, as opposed to saying that came here and we are not making money. But we can position ourselves in a way where we can take care of all the various jobs that need to be had at that time and keep it up consistently. So then the following year after that is the Olympics, and the Olympics can be really horrible or it could be really good for us. And I think out of what we learned in the 84 Olympics, it made it, to me, possible for me to be Zooming like we're doing now. I did it in the 1984 Olympics as a way to show that this is something possible. And it also shows how, through this kind of a program, how it could be used for positivity, and it also could be used for negativity. But the more we use it and the more we make things happen, we can take up that bandwidth, of what things look like. The only other part that we're doing that's quite unusual, that isn't unusual, because if you really look at the real brokers that were the real richest people in the country and the world right now, and especially this country, are the people who have their product is free. Facebook, Google, all of those are free. We need to do a real drill down on free. So we're going to have an open source, is what we're calling our free port. And everybody who has an idea, like they do on Twitter, come to Sankofa City, and you have a portal to broadcast in and work with these new folks that we're starting to work with. And we can build out a new kind of a template that you can make funds instead of it just going to Google or Facebook. And those we can kind of we can study a niche to see what it looks like by the time the Olympics comes. And we can be an organized group of people just like other cultures who would do this logically. It's just a very logical thing to do, is to build out your benchmarks to this place. And if we do this correctly, it will set our children up for the next 7 generations. And that's the major purpose for Sankofa City, is to sit up for 7 generations forward. If we think that much further, then it makes it, you don't talk this Gen Z stuff. We're talking about your children of you Gen Zs. You babies now, we want to make sure that your children are taken care of. And just like I'm making sure that my children are taken care of, and I'm a part of the whatever generation that you want to call it. I'm a part of a generation that's, I'm a grandfather. And so I'm wanting to make sure that my grandchildren are going to live well, and then their children that they're going to have, that they live well too. So I think that's the principles that we're wanting to test out. And if it really works, then we could sail off for the rest of the century doing pretty well with our children. So that's my optimistic way that we're thinking of Sankofa City. Is really not trying to, and we're not even going to try to compete against the people who are teaching us to fish, because Circuit is the company that's teaching us how to fish. And I don't want to compete against them at all. We're wanting to create a totally different platform out of their teaching us how to do this. And we're going to call them art bots. So, and they'll be moving around the neighborhood. And when you see them, it'll be just like meeting Soul Train or meeting the Motown is what I always say. You know, we're as different platform as music-wise as Motown is to the rest of the music that took place. People liked it. It was good. It kept us through things. We're wanting our system to be very similar, very homey, treat you nice. It isn't using a whole bunch of B words and N words and all these kinds of things. We're wanting to make it kind of like a real pleasant, engaging environment. And you can go to the B words and the N words in those places as they're sold. But in our general public, we're wanting our environment to be very, very coherent and clear about how proud we are. Unapologetically Black out here, you know.
We are so honored to have been speaking with Ben Caldwell, our Baba, filmmaker, educator, innovator, organizer, and so much more in the Black arts movement. And he's based here in Los Angeles. And so we wanted to thank you. Close out with a quote from your book, and that is that all communicate different frequencies and are reminders of being alive. Reminders that speech and dialogue are ancient arts of supreme alchemy. And so we thank you for sharing those words in your book, for sharing your wisdom today with our audience, and for all that you do, Ben Caldwell.
Thank you for the platform. And I want to thank just a few people. And the main one is I just left a good meeting with Destination Crenshaw, and they're doing some real fabulous dreaming for the future. And I want to make sure that that happens. And I also want to shout out my 2 daughters who have been helping me really big time through the pandemic up to now on getting this Kaos Kids, which is for 9 to 99-year-olds. So call us up. You can see it at any time, and we're here on Saturdays. And thank you for the showcase.
And in closing, we'd like to thank our guests. Thank you, Dr. Keidrick Roy. Thank you, Baba Ben Caldwell. Thank you to our producers, Dr. Gerald Horne, Sister Flora, Sister Femi, Brother Brandon. Thank you to our board op Wendell and all those who made today's program possible. We look forward to seeing you at the Pan-African Film Festival starting Tuesday, February 4th, happening at the Culver Theater. You can go to www.paff.org for the details. And until next week, signing off for Freedom Now, this is Sister Thage. As always, we stand ready for revolution.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.
Power to the people.